Big questions about Christmas coming up on Curious Minds.
Chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Jack Frost nipping at
Happy mid-December to you. This is Evan Van Sickle coming to you from the Christian Student Center, getting ready for a little Christmas party and doing some remodeling, some cheap labor with those aimers chipping in, pulling out carpet, pulling up tile, getting ready to lay some wood floor. Should look nice. Come check it out sometime. We're here at the end of the semester, and when this is released, probably be the last day of the semester, so a bunch of relief students out there. After this, as I am away from the university for a couple weeks, I am going to release the Age of the Earth series, so that'll be my Christmas gift to you. But for this one, I thought what could be a great close to the semester, a great final thing before Christmas, and of course, Christmas seems a very relevant topic, so usually is not a time of too much controversy, but over the years, there are several questions about Christmas that I've taken notice of. The meaning, the authenticity of the story, and whether we should even celebrate it. So, that's where we're going. Let's go. First question, what was the time and the year of Jesus' birth? We have references to the governors, especially if you look at the beginning of the book of Luke, and the first 3 chapters, really. You have not a year listed, not a day listed, but some events that were listed. A census. We know that it was during the reign of Herod the Great, which they used to say ended with Herod's death at 4 BC. New and better evidence is saying that Herod actually died at 1 BC. Putting the time of Christ and the order for the execution of the babies in that time frame prior to 1 BC. There was some confusion regarding this date, and even in engaging with this with a great Old Testament and New Testament professor, he favored the 4 BC date. That would put the crucifixion of Jesus probably at 30 AD, which seems to be very accurate as well. But probably 2, 3, or 4 BC is the best estimate there. And it probably also wasn't on December 25th. There's other reasons that the holiday was placed on December 25th, other than some strict timeline regarding the day that Jesus was born. All right, second question. Who were the wise men, and how many were there? Right, traditionally we see 3 wise men. They come from the east. That's probably Babylon. And these men from the east were probably in relation to the ministry of Daniel during the exile. Israel was taken in exile to Babylon, so over to the east. Daniel and his friends were very informed on the ways of the Lord, and Daniel was a great prophet. Some impressive prophecies there, even a prophecy regarding the timeline of the ushering in of the Messiah, specifically the time that he would ride into Jerusalem for the final time. Now, how many were there? I think that's a lot more than 3. I think a caravan of these guys would probably make it more than 3, although there were 3 gifts, and that's customarily why we see 3 wise men. And when exactly did they visit? That also we're not sure about, but it's after he was born. Traditionally, we see it as the very night he was born, boom, they show up, bringing their gifts. But that doesn't seem likely. There's a couple clues to that. Herod, remember, instituted an infanticide of babies under age 2. So the wise men inquired of Herod, and so Herod got worried that there was going to be some king starting a rebellion. This, of course, wasn't the type of king that they were talking about. And since he was worried about this upcoming king, what do? Well, you kill every baby so that this baby can't rise up and take the throne, as is rumored. But under the age of 2 seems pretty excessive if this baby was just born a few minutes earlier. Probably not 2 years later, though, because I would imagine Herod would wager on the side of caution, and if it was a year or so, or even 6 or 8 months, he might just say, kill them all under 2 to be on the safe side, as if that's playing it safe. Ridiculous what these guys would do. So they probably didn't visit him in the stable, although it makes for a nice Christmas scene to kind of condense it all into one image. Now, there's a program you may have heard of if you've followed Christian apologetics much. It's called Starry Night, and it's software that takes you to any place on Earth at any day in history to be able to look at the shape of the stars at that time and in that place. So some people get curious and wonder, what is this Bethlehem star thing? What is this guiding star in the south? Well, on Starry Night, it reveals possibly the brightest star in history, and it appears to stand still because of shifts in directions. And it does that for multiple nights right around December 25th. So kind of surprising coincidence? I don't know. But that's the time when the wise men see the star over the town of Bethlehem right there around December 25th. Very interesting. And I think that, according to that program, was 2 BC. Now, it was over Bethlehem from the perspective of Jerusalem. This is proven by the software. The software also reveals what they probably saw in the sky that would have triggered their interest. So you scale it back a couple months or a couple years, and you basically have the Virgin, Virgo, birthing a king being crowned. So you have all these things happening at once, and I think a lion has to do with it also. A lion representing the tribe of Judah. So even looking at all this and some of these mysteries being revealed, I think that much of this remains clouded in mystery. What exactly triggered the trip of the wise men? How long did it take? How many were there? And when exactly they showed up? I think a lot of that is still pretty much in mystery, and that just has to do with, well, people weren't ready for a major event, so they didn't know that this stuff was going to be asked about thousands of years in the future. Now, we call these guys wise men, and I tend to think that's an understatement for them to travel that far for months, 900 miles or so. Would you walk that distance based on a hunch? Would you walk from Albuquerque to Boise based on a certain construct of the constellations? I would have a hard time doing that. That's a lot of wisdom. That's a lot of confidence. So their faith is certainly to be admired. Next question, was Bethlehem foretold? Bethlehem much smaller than Jerusalem, maybe 5 or 10 miles away. So kind of a strange prediction that would not place the birth in Jerusalem. Conventional wisdom would say, well, Jerusalem. Mormonism, or Book of Mormon, says Jerusalem. Well, now we have this suggestion that it would be Bethlehem. How certain of a prophecy is this? Well, it's in Micah 5:2, and it says, "But as for you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you one will go forth for me to be ruler in Israel. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity." Now you can think that prophecies are extremely vague, but I look at that one, and I think this can't really be fulfilled by anybody but the Messiah. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity. This can't be a conventional king that's being talked about. Mary and Joseph did not seem to think that there was anything significant to this place. And if it weren't for the census, they wouldn't have gone there. Yet even though Mary and Joseph didn't appear aware of the Bethlehem prophecy, that doesn't mean the prophecy is ambiguous. And proof of that is found in John 7:42. The people who knew Jesus and knew his claims to be Messiah, they actually used the Bethlehem birthplace as evidence against him because they didn't know really where he came from. They said, "Isn't the Messiah supposed to be born in Bethlehem? Yet this one wasn't." Little did they know, his place of birth is not the same place he grew up. He grew up in Nazareth and spent some of the time in Egypt during the infanticide. But yes, he was born in Bethlehem. And some of the shame surrounding that story, the fact that he was born in a stable surrounded by animals, and other than these wise men coming however later they came, there really wasn't anything magnificent to it. If you're going to force this story to fit, I think you're going to try to make it look a little more spectacular than, yeah, they dumped him in a feeding trough. Definitely a mark of honesty on that story. Why is it that most of the New Testament really doesn't say much about Jesus' birth story? Paul doesn't go into it. Really, the only authors that go into it are Matthew at the beginning of his gospel and Luke early on in his gospel. So why doesn't it come up so many other places? Probably because those authors did not feel like they knew enough information. They didn't really have first or second-hand information about the events. So most authors aren't comfortable writing about it, but Luke is an avid historian, so he went there, and he's good at interviewing the right kinds of people to get the information. And genealogies are also very important to the Jews. And Matthew, writing to the Jews, seems very interested in Jewish history and genealogy, and thus included the genealogy and the birth story of Jesus. Now, don't the genealogies contradict? Now, Luke and Matthew do have different genealogies. Remember, they're writing to different audiences, for one, but there's also more than one way to tell a genealogy. Wouldn't there only be one way to go back to David or back to Abraham? And that's not even the case. Both Mary and Joseph had lines that led back to David. Matthew's following the paternal line, so down through Joseph. That's how Jews would keep track of their genealogies, but the more literal genealogy would be through Mary's line, which would go through her family and meet back at Zerubbabel. So no, they don't contradict even though they're different. All right, here's a big question. Isn't it more likely that Mary had sex out of wedlock than a virgin birth occurred? Wouldn't she just maybe claim that to save herself from being shamed? The virgin birth is the huge doctrinal point that comes out of this Christmas celebration. The virgin birth is a miracle. We don't deny that. And since it is a miracle, of course it's going to be something that we're not going to see repeated events, and it's going to appear completely unlikely or impossible by natural standards. We shouldn't have to make that our standard. Miracles happened before that time, and they happened after that time, and they happened frequently in the life of Jesus. So, is it more likely? Well, I don't think so when you consider all the evidence. They didn't appear adamant about meeting the virgin birth requirement. Nobody was really talking about that, even though it was prophesied. They did say, isn't the Messiah supposed to come out of Bethlehem? But they didn't say, yeah, but isn't the Messiah supposed to have a virgin birth? Let's check this guy's record. And yet it's very important, but important in a way where it couldn't have been forced upon Jesus. So the way I see it, there was no purpose for making up the virgin birth. It would have been much easier to just say, yeah, some guy just forced himself on me. Sorry, nothing I could do about it. Or to say, hey, surprise, we got married. But nobody's claiming, the Holy Spirit came over me, when they were actually fooling around. If Mary had sex out of wedlock, that doesn't do well to explain Mary's responses. Because Mary, when she was visited by the angel, she said, how is that even possible? I haven't even known a man. I'm a virgin. I don't just get pregnant and have babies out of nowhere. Her other response was, wow, I am incredibly blessed. Praise God that he's looked with favor upon me to be the bearer of the Christ child. Right? Virgin birth explains that. Sex out of wedlock definitely does not. It also doesn't explain Joseph's response. Joseph's response was, that's it, we're done, goodbye. He was ready to put her away, and it was only the dream encounter that turned him around. Now, I would imagine this is more than just a conventional dream, right? I wouldn't have a dream and then hastily change my mind regarding something so significant. But this encounter was powerful enough for Joseph to turn from cutting off the engagement with Mary to being all in, embracing her, and believing that a virgin birth was actually taking place. Wow. In Mark 6:3, and this from Sean McDowell's article on the topic, Jesus is called the Son of Mary by the people. And this implies a shameful uncertainty regarding who the Father is. So they don't act like they know who the Father is. They don't say, oh, well, Joseph's your daddy. They're implying some stranger is your father. Even though they didn't have genetic testing, they didn't have DNA testing, it can be pretty easy to identify who the baby's dad is based on resemblances. So if there's other men in the area, and there's not a whole ton of men in Nazareth, in that neighborhood of Mary, and she's probably kept sheltered at home all the time. So if it was Joseph, well, you're going to have some Joseph resemblances. If it's some neighbor down the street, well, you might have some resemblances with that guy. Now, I also believe, like I said, Mary was pretty sheltered. Young women didn't live alone. They didn't go out, move into their own apartment, work outside the home, mess around till midnight, and then come back with the father saying, hey, what have you been doing? They would hang out at home. They would have people around them. They were protected until some husband came to take them away. So it's not likely that someone in that situation would go seeking promiscuous situations, and especially not somebody from the lineage that Mary was from, with the religious background that they had. I find this very interesting too. Critics will say, how did they know she was a virgin? Well, the Bible suggests that there is proof of a young lady's virginity. I'm not going to go into any detail here. I will just read from Deuteronomy 22:13-18. It says, quote, if any man takes a wife and goes into her and then turns against her and charges her with shameful deeds and publicly defames her and says, I took this woman, but when I came near to her, I did not find her a virgin. Then the girl's father and her mother shall take and bring out the evidence of a girl's virginity to the elders of the city at the gate. The girl's father shall say to the elders, I gave my daughter to this man for a wife, but he turned against her. And behold, he has charged her with shameful deeds, saying, I did not find your daughter a virgin, but this is evidence of my daughter's virginity. And they shall spread the garment before the elders of the city. So the elders of that city shall take the man and chastise him. So there is proof of this kind of thing. And Joseph still could have terminated the engagement with Mary based on this evidence. He did not do so. His dream was confirmed by the evidence, and that's why he continued to live faithfully in the testament that this Christ child was not his own. Now, was the virgin birth foretold? Yeah, sure it was in Isaiah 7:14. It says, Quote, "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin will be with child and bear a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel." There you go. Virgin will be with child. Case closed. Well, not so fast. Because some are saying now that the Isaiah 7:14 prophecy is too ambiguous, because that word in the Hebrew for virgin could be translated a young unmarried woman. Isn't that so, Christian? You say it's prophesied, but it can just mean a young female. Well, sure, the Hebrew word Alma, used there in Isaiah 7:14, it can be translated either way, a young unmarried woman and a virgin. These terms became pretty interchangeable because a young unmarried woman was synonymous with the term virgin. It was just, you don't go out having sex until you're married, and you don't leave the house and get married until you're of that proper age. And then when you're of that proper age, you can become married, and at which point you won't be a virgin anymore. So the interchangeability really suggests a cultural connection between this unmarried young woman living in the house and a woman who is married and thus not a virgin anymore. And they'll say, well, why'd they use the word Alma then if it can be translated a different way? Why didn't they use the word Betula for virgin? That one's pretty common. Well, that can be used to imply other things as well, such as the congregation of Israel or one who is just separated, pure. So the same arguments would be made regardless of which Hebrew word is used. The other evidence in favor of Isaiah 7:14 literally talking about a virgin is the fact that in about 250 BC, the translators of the Septuagint, that's taking the Hebrew Old Testament and turning it into Greek, those translators took it to mean virgin, not a young woman or an unmarried woman. They translated it to the Greek word parthenos, which unambiguously means virgin. Pretty good evidence, 250 years before the birth of Christ, that they took that term to mean virgin, which is a pretty major claim. So why wouldn't a term like this be more clear? Why wouldn't it appear more certain, all these prophecies and expectations regarding the Messiah? If the expectation was held by all, such a thing can be forced upon the situation. But since the expectation was not vital, it would not need to be forced upon the text or upon the situation. They didn't know that they were expecting a virgin birth until they went and evaluated the Old Testament later on. Part of the brilliance of prophecy is that it remains somewhat veiled, and this keeps these circumstances authentic rather than forcing various connections. They didn't know everything that was to be expected regarding the Messiah, but when those things happened, they're able to read back into the Old Testament and say, aha, this was the perfect fulfillment of everything that we should have expected. It was just veiled for a time so that they could not force evidence upon the Messiah. And it seems that it wasn't until after the fact people began to realize the significance and necessity of the virgin birth. The virgin birth implies the second Adam, and it implies one who can be born without the sin nature, and thus be both God and man in nature, and be a perfect sacrifice for the sins of mankind. I don't see any other way that it could have happened but through a virgin birth, even though Mary and Joseph and the original early disciples probably were not aware of this. All right, a couple more questions. Doesn't Christmas have pagan origins? We're here talking about celebrating Christmas, and it's got pagan origins? How could you celebrate that? Okay, yes, December 25th, it was not called Christmas, but December 25th, the holiday on that day had pagan roots. It was called Saturnalia, after the god Saturn. And it had to do with sensuality, lots of rioting, and it was known as a time when all the laws of the land would be lifted for 1 week. So darkness could reign over that area by lifting all the laws. And so what Saturnalia illustrates is both the darkness and the lifting of the darkness, coming out of the darkness. And I think that's very interesting when you talk about connecting December 25th with the coming of Christ. And look at Simeon's prophecy right after Jesus was born, Luke 2:29-32. Now, Lord, you are releasing your bondservant to depart in peace, according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared in the presence of all peoples, a light of revelation to the Gentiles, and the glory of your people Israel. Isn't it just like God to create an irony where there's a pagan holiday about the lifting of the darkness, and what you have replacing that is what Simeon describes as a light of revelation to the Gentiles. A light lifting the darkness, done so by the coming of the Messiah, Jesus Christ, the promised one, the Redeemer, the Lamb of God, into the world. Now, as you may know, Constantine converted to Christianity, so he began replacing pagan holidays with Christian events, Christian commemorative events. Easter and Christmas had their roots on these days that used to be pagan celebrations. He made them Christian celebrations. Is that a bad thing? I kind of think that's awesome. Replacing what was sensual and rioting with something that commemorates the birth of Jesus Christ? Why are we complaining about it having pagan roots when the roots got replaced? I think that's all the more reason to celebrate when you consider that this replaced the darkness. Celebrating Christmas on December 25th replaces something they used to celebrate. And I'm going to celebrate Christmas all the more as the birth of Christ in the face of the fact that this used to be something that was very dirty and foul, sensual, worldly, and idolatrous. Now that doesn't mean everybody has to take that approach. The question is, so is it okay to celebrate Christmas along with the culture, or does that mean I'm participating in pagan rituals? I don't want to make a blanket rule because I know there are good Christian people who choose not to celebrate Christmas, at least not in the ways that mimic the culture whatsoever. And other people want to be very close to culture. They see a connection between the culture and the living out of their faith. So I think both can be okay. But it's a matter of the heart, isn't it? What you imitate is what you imitate in your heart. Putting up a Christmas tree does not make you pagan in nature. But think well about this. As I always like to encourage, think well about the things that matter most. And if Christmas matters a lot, which it sure does to the culture, think well about why you're celebrating it and try to encourage others to celebrate it with the right heart for the right reasons. If you celebrate, put Christ at the center. If you do not celebrate, put Christ at the center of that. Avoid it for the right reasons and don't be condemning toward people who would celebrate it. Because it says in Romans 14:5, one person regards one day above another regards every day alike. Each person must be fully convinced in his own mind. So have good reasons for the decisions you make regarding your celebration of Christmas. Don't do it simply because culture's doing it and it's the popular thing to do and Hallmark has cute movies. Do it because you've thought deeply about how to best love and appreciate and show honor to God and to the sending of the Son of God to earth. Celebrate in your heart what commemorates that the best. And don't look down on someone else for doing it differently, but encourage them to pursue the honor of God in their recognition of this time of the year. So that, my friends, is my summary on the celebration of Christmas. It's been a wonderful 2019, many adventures, moving into Albuquerque and beginning campus ministry here, and certainly we'll have an amazing 2020 as well. And I don't anticipate recording myself again here until the new year. I look forward to talking to you then. Look forward to this season. Hope that God blesses each of you and that you are a blessing to your families. And that you can take this time to rest, but to rest well, to rest in thoughtfulness and in effective consideration of what God deserves from you during this season. So, I'll talk to you in about 2,000 miles and in about 3 weeks. Until then, may God bless and guide you.
Everybody knows a turkey and some mistletoe help to make the season bright.